guys, welcome back to the Replay Media. Today we're going to do something more different than usual, combining cinema with the history of our society. It's been almost 56 years since Martin Luther King left this world, but his memory is more alive than ever, and his teachings continue to show us the right way to live in harmony with one another. Regardless of your religion, it is undeniable that Martin Luther King was one of the most important activists in history, especially in the fight against racial discrimination in a very difficult time for the black community. In honor of his birthday, MLK Day is celebrated every year on January 15th, and as cinephiles, what better way to pay our respects to him than by revisiting the best film adaptations of this historical figure and his legacy. King, 1978, directed by Abbie Mann. We begin with a miniseries that was released by NBC just 10 years after MLK's death. Starring Paul Winfield, King offers an extended and intimate look at MLK's work at a time when his memory was fairly fresh. Winfield delivered a performance worthy of an Emmy nomination while being accompanied by an excellent cast consisting of Cicely Tyson, Ossie Davis, Harold Rollins, Stephen Hill, and others. With 4.5 hours of duration, the miniseries covers MLK's beginnings as an activist in the 50s until his assassination in Memphis, with special emphasis on the Montgomery bus boycott, his meetings with Kennedy and Johnson, Birmingham and Selma, the opposition to the Vietnam War, and the campaigns in Chicago and Memphis. While it has some errors and details typical of the television of the era, King stands as a risky bet by NBC to keep his legacy alive just a few years after his death. It's a shame that it had low ratings on the 3 nights it aired, but that's why we should rescue it today. It is interesting to see the portrait of MLK with fresh eyes, and not for nothing did it get 9 Emmy nominations. Malcolm X, 1992, directed by Spike Lee. To understand MLK's perspective, we must also understand Malcolm X's. Two figures who at first glance seem radically different, but in some ways had the same goal. Many even compare them to Magneto and Professor X from the X-Men universe. Starring Denzel Washington and directed by Spike Lee, Malcolm X is probably one of the best biopics ever, and at the same time, one of the rawest. The film was not afraid to depict the great tragedies in the life of activist Malcolm X, from the violent death of his father to his time in prison, forming the strong and tenacious character we know so well. For that very reason, it is believed that this film is an attack from the black community towards whites, although this is not the case. Denzel Washington himself has said that this film is for people of all colors, but not for closed minds, something worthy of MLK. In short, Malcolm X is one of the films that explores racism and the cruelty behind it, which gives it a very powerful message that continues to be talked about today. Not only is it connected to the figure of MLK for his fight against racial discrimination, but the activist also appears in a series of clips following Malcolm's death. Selma Lord Selma, 1999. Directed by Charles Burnett. Selma's 1965 march to Montgomery was one of the darkest events in MLK's life, but it also made it clear how badly society needed someone willing to speak out like him. The television movie Selma Lord Selma revolves around the events of Bloody Sunday in Selma, Alabama. Only instead of starring MLK, the film is told through the eyes of an 8-year-old African-American girl named Cheyenne Webb, better known as the smallest freedom fighter. This film was a surprisingly vivid interpretation of the events of Bloody Sunday and the clashes between armed police and peaceful protesters. Why surprising? Well, because the film was produced by Walt Disney Television, which occasionally leaves aside cartoons to show real life and how raw it can be. Based on the book of the same name written by Cheyenne Webb and Rachel West Nelson, Selma Lord Selma is a television drama that no one expected, but that pleased everyone. With Jurnee Smollett as the main character, we see how this little girl was filled with inspiration thanks to MLK's words, and went out to fight for her right to vote against all odds. And of course, she wasn't even old enough to vote, but that's the powerful effect MLK had on people. Boycott, 2001, directed by Clark Johnson. When Rosa Parks, a middle-class African-American woman, refused to give up her seat to a white person on a bus 68 years ago, she never thought she would change history forever. The greatness of the smallest and simplest acts. Boycott is an HBO television film revolving around the events of the Montgomery bus boycott, starring Iris Little Thomas as Rosa Parks and Jeffrey Wright in the role of MLK. With some moments that emulate a homemade movie, the film positions the viewers in the heat of the civil civil rights struggle. It seems they just wanted bus seats for people of all colors, though it became much more than that. Jeffrey Wright, who we recently saw as Commissioner Gordon in The Batman, delivered a quiet performance as MLK with his trademark medal, and also knew how to exploit the acclaimed activist rhetoric and powers of conviction. To this, we must add an excellent cast and a production so good that it could perfectly be a film released in theaters. Selma 2014, directed by Ava DuVernay. While all of the adaptations on this list are excellent and provide valuable insight into MLK, the 2014 film Selma stands as the best work based on his legacy. Selma approaches the monumental mosaic of the civil and racial rights struggle by looking through a filmic microscope, focusing on the lens of what happened in the town of Selma, Alabama during a few days in March 1965. Days in which Reverend King and his followers decided to put President Lyndon B. Johnson on the ropes by organizing a peaceful march in favor of the black population's right to vote. It's the most faithful and realistic reinterpretation of the events of Bloody Sunday, with careful cinematography and an exceptional soundtrack that makes you feel and suffer with the characters. Speaking of them, the cast is full of talents like Carmen Ejogo, Tom Wilkinson, Tim Roth, Common, Tessa Thompson, and Oprah Winfrey herself. All of them were led, literally, by David Oyelowo as Martin Luther King in one of his most powerful performances to date. King has been sanctified by history. Selma humanizes him through his flaws. We get to know King in all his facets, from husband to activist strategist. MLK once confessed that he had a dream in front of thousands and thousands of people. With Selma, we learn of the intimacy of his nightmares. And so we end this list full of gems with which to commemorate the figure of Martin Luther King on January 15th. Beyond the fact that they are works of fiction, their foundations are based on the legacy of this activist who not only had big dreams, but also made them come true. If you know of more works about MLK, please mention them in the comments. If you like this video, don't forget to leave a like and hit the notification bell, as well as subscribe to the Replay Media so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. Thanks. See you soon.